What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Lumix Live, actually from our standard studio here again, finally. It's been a very long couple of weeks here. Obviously, I've been out on the road for some various different things, and yeah, we're really excited to talk about the brand new G9 Mark II. So we're going to be kind of covering a whole bunch of stuff that I've that we've kind of talked about on the stream a couple of days ago for the announcement, but also really just give everyone a more focused opportunity to ask us questions. Whenever we do the full-blown live stream and then the Q&A afterwards, it's always a little difficult because we're monitoring three separate chat streams, and we're always trying to get to as many of those questions as we can. But yeah, so I'm super happy that everyone's joining us today. As you get into this, if you are new, if this is the first time you're joining a Lumix Live, these are weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, for the most part, unless I'm on vacation or away from the studio, in which case there'll typically be a recorded stream put up in place. But they're all designed for you to be able to communicate directly with us, the brand, with Lumix. And obviously today we are super excited about the G9 Mark II. This is one of those things that if you joined us at the launch event, you could tell I've kind of known about this camera for quite some time now, and I'm finally excited to be able to talk about this. And yeah, if you have questions for us, tag at Lumix USA, as you can see many are doing so far. Just helps me pick them out and take a look at them. And yeah, so we're going to kind of go through this. I've got my G9 Mark II hooked up over HDMI, so we'll be able to run through the menus, show you what's really cool in the system with this. We will also be taking a look at a bunch of the photos that I've taken with this camera. I'm probably going to focus more on the photo side for today, but if you have video questions, drop them in the chat, and super happy to try to answer as many of them as I can. I am planning on having Matt Fraser join me again, probably in 2 weeks' time. Actually, no, probably in 3 weeks' time, maybe next week, not 100% sure. So that we can go in a lot more on the video side of it. And I know Matt is one of those people that you guys have loved to always have come on the chat. So we just got to work out a little bit of scheduling stuff there. So first off, let's jump through the chat. It is awesome to see some old faces back. Awesome to see, it looks like some new as well. So let's see what we've got here. Cliff's first comment, is BlackMagic officially a member of the L-Mount Alliance right now? Honestly, I'm not sure. None of that stuff I think is ever confirmed until you go to the l-mount.com, the formal site, and you see the logos up there. So just keep an eye on that page and you'll get a good idea. Albert, looking forward to this. Me too. Eric, just want to say stoked with this release, as am I. Let's see. What is the appeal of the GH6 now that the G9 Mark II is here? That is going to be a very big point that I'm going to talk about as we go on and give a couple more minutes for some more people because I keep seeing more of the concurrent going up here. Yannick says, I'm on the edge of updating from a G9ii. What are the advantages of the G9 Mark II over the S5 Mark II in photography? I'm not so much into video. This will be, as I start going over some of the photo examples, this hopefully will make it a little clear for you where its advantages are. JC, yes, it was awesome meeting you at Build in New York City. Those of you that stopped by the booth in New York, thank you so much. It's always awesome to actually meet people in person. So hopefully as we have more shows going on in the future, we'll have more opportunities to meet everybody in person. Cool. All right. Can you talk about the intervalometer? It's the same as other G cameras. Can we please get infinity option for time lapse? It's a good thing to talk about there. Why was the flash port removed from the original G9? We're definitely going to talk about that. Cool. All right. So, as everybody has kind of seen already, G9 Mark II is the newest in the Micro Four Thirds line of cameras from us. And just to kind of put this in perspective, because I do want to address a couple things that I see online that I think are very, very misleading in how some people are describing their thoughts on these cameras. So in my hands, I have the G9 Mark II and the original G9. So one of the first things that I want to make very clear about these two cameras, the G9 Mark II is actually technically smaller. It is a little bit taller in height, but it is actually a little bit smaller than the original G9. And honestly, a lot of people I know have been asking about, grip material and fit and finish feel, that kind of thing, and how the camera holds. I encourage everybody, if you are even remotely interested in this camera, when they are at local dealers near you, go in, get your hands on one of these. They should be shipping in, kind of early November, but I'm sure that we'll have, at least here in the US, and I know in other regions, you'll have opportunities to get some hands-on with these cameras. The overall design of it is in my opinion, a really big improvement over what the G9 was set out to do originally. This is a really nice camera. I've loved my G9 for quite a long time, but I have, to be fair, kind of stopped using it for a number of years. But I encourage you to go around, play with the new one when you have an opportunity. So, core basics here, as we said, it's an upgraded 25.2 megapixel sensor. That is not the sensor in the GH6. It is a completely different product. It is a hardware change, software changes, and obviously it's got PDAF. So anyone out there trying to tell you that it's the same sensor as the GH6 is just wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. It is a totally different sensor. It has entirely different characteristics and hardware the way it's been built. So image quality wise out of this, you're going to get a marked improvement, especially in the lower ISO ranges compared to the GH6. So it really does sit and hold its own as a true flagship camera. And when we say flagship for this camera, when I, in the launch video, had said this is the newest flagship for Lumix cameras, you have to remember that we have technically like 3 or 4 separate like sublines of the Lumix line. We have our S series, our GH, our G series, and then there's the GX and some of the others out there. So as far as flagship goes, this is the flagship G series camera. So G series typically are the more photo-focused products. They're the ones that are going to carry a lot more emphasis as far as what they're designed for. And when we talk about this camera being a photographic first camera, a camera that was designed for photographers and by photographers, a lot of that really comes down to decisions made as far as the way the chassis goes, the layout is, and then obviously some of the feature set. So photographically, there's no active cooling in this camera. Photographers across the board, when we came out with the S5 Mark II, the Mark IIX, the GH6, even the S1H, had pointed out that they would prefer a camera that wasn't designed for videographers first and foremost. So the active cooling is taken out of this camera. That means that it is a fully sealed top plate. There is not really a big difference in weather resistance between the two, whether we have the cooling solution or not. We have a lot of experience building cameras and devices as a company that are weather resistant, even with open cooling vents in them. So a lot of times that's more of maybe a placebo thing for a lot of cases, but it allowed us to really kind of look at this and say, well, does this thing need to have hour after hour after hour unlimited recording time? No, because the vast majority of photographers that we work with and we've talked to said that as long as you can be out there getting, 5, 10, 15-minute clips out in the field in adverse conditions, really high temperatures, or in a studio, just click the thing to record and let it run, that's more than enough for what the vast majority of people wanted. As a B cam for a camera like the GH6 or an S5 Mark II or a Mark IIX, this is going to get you a lot of those faster frame rates and the cool stuff that we'll talk about in a minute that Micro Four Thirds offers over the full frame line, because sensors are typically more advanced in the smaller side and they can get you some additional benefits that full frame's kind of just not there with yet. So we'll talk about some of those as well. And yeah, we'll kind of go from there. The other thing that I want to touch on before we go too far into this is the decision to pair this in the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX chassis. Lots of people have, kind of really, kind of been, I think, mixed on the logic behind this. Why is it in the S5 Mark II chassis? And there's a couple of reasons behind this. One, unifying the design and the concept for similar types of cameras is a really good positive step forward. I believe we are one of the only camera companies, if not the only camera company right now, that you can buy a full frame camera and a crop censored camera with the exact same handling, fit, and finish. So if you are someone that's in full frame, like an S5 Mark II or Mark IIX, and you want to have something that's going to get you faster burst rates, that's going to get you similar resolution, but also get you faster video recording, so things like 4K 120, you can very easily go into this camera and not have to worry about things like muscle memory, your accessories. All the cages are going to match up perfectly between these two cameras. Hell, even the new battery grip that we came out with, the BG1, will fit on both of these cameras. So you get a lot of really cool kind of layouts here that really kind of consolidate the series and show you that you can jump back and forth between these for their respective strengths and not have to think about, oh, well, why is the back button AF different on this camera versus the other one? Why is it that my dials are in slightly different places? It makes it a seamless experience jumping back and forth. The other advantage of going with this slightly larger chassis, compared to what I think some people have said that they've wanted, is that your balance is much better. Now, I hear a lot of the calls online for wanting a smaller, ultra compact camera, and this myth that Micro Four Thirds is only about small compact cameras, and truthfully, couldn't be further from the truth. Micro Four Thirds was always designed as an alternative to full frame and APS-C DSLR cameras. So by that respect, yes, they were smaller, they were more compact, but they were always about being able to try to provide the best value and feature set in a given platform as a system in of all of its parts. So if I were to take something like the 100 to 400 millimeter, so this is the new one, the new 100 to 400. If I were to take this lens and say want to go to a full frame variant of this, we're talking going to something like the 60 to 600 or the 150 to 600 from Sigma in full frame, which is twice the weight. Actually, it's over twice the weight, and it's about twice the size of the Micro Four Thirds size. So when you start looking at pairing systems together as a whole, Micro Four Thirds still has big advantages. Does that mean that it's going to be perfect for you out there if you are dedicated into full frame? Not necessarily, but there are so many other people out there that also have big advantages, big benefits needed for lighter overall kits, especially if you're traveling a lot. I can tell you for the last 2.5 weeks, traveling across the country multiple times, many different airports, it was actually a big relief traveling with the G9 Mark II and its kit compared to traveling with my entire S5 Mark II kit for the same focal lengths I would have wanted to bring on these various trips. And I went to some gorgeous places, the Northeast for New York, so I got some street photography in, and then out into Colorado, which is where we were for the launch, with my ultra telephoto lenses. It's about understanding that there are multiple systems for various different aspects of what people want to do with them. So that out of the way, you know, why they're the same chassis design as the S5 Mark II, the fact that it is actually smaller than the G9, the original one, there are just some little ergonomic changes there. Let's actually talk about what is in this camera, the newest cool stuff. And a lot of that is with the focusing. So as many people have been really kind of wanting, the G9 Mark II supports PDAF, so it's a phase hybrid autofocusing system. And there's a lot of cool new advantages in with this system that I think we've talked about a little bit. I know I've talked a lot about over the recent, you know, kind of series of updates that we've been doing. Oh, let me just fix my battery pack here. So when we start going into, you know, what is it that this camera brings compared to a lot of the others, there are so many more subject detection options available in this camera. And a lot of that's due to just what we've learned from the S5 Mark II and the Mark IIX and what everyone's been asking us to kind of update. So if we go into the autofocus detection systems here, it's the same exact control. You just press the button in the back of the mode selector switch here. brings you into the menu options for the different options here. You still have all of your separate options here for tracking, full area, the zone, which can be customized, zone, the kind of more default zone, as well as your one area plus, and pinpoint. But where a lot of the bigger differences are in here, in the actual detection options. So first and foremost, we separated out human and animal detection. So these have been now divided into their own independent detection modes. The reason for this is that, one, a lot of the feedback we got was that while having, subject detection for human and animal was great, we've been one of the earliest adopters doing this kind of stuff. There are times where, you just want it to focus on animals. You don't care about people in the frame. You just want to use the tool and have it add support for you where you need it. So we split them out. This allowed us to carry forward on the G9 Mark II our human eye and body detection, which is the general use one that you're probably going to want to work with if you're doing autofocus for any kind of normal people. This one will detect the human torso, the head, the back of the head, the face and eye when they get close enough into the frame for them to be recognized. General all-purpose human tracking. Then there's the human just eye and face tracking. This is where I think there's been maybe a little bit of confusion in some cases. The human eye and face tracking, when it's dedicated out on its own, is just looking at eye and face. So if you're a portrait photographer and you're not doing, torso shots, you're literally just doing headshots. That's where this mode is probably going to be more useful in that case. Or if you're doing just straight up talking heads kind of video recording where your subject's not turning, they're not moving out of the place. That's where this mode comes in, because this is what is just using this part of the frame. So a little bit of clarity there. But when we go into the animal detection, this is where we made, because we split these modes out, it gave us some extra benefits here. So now you have the animal body tracking, which is going to give you the animal's body, the whole form, everything's cool. This is what we've been doing normally. It's still going to prioritize the head of the animal, where it can possibly do that, but it's a little bit more loose in the terms that it's just going to look for animals. You pick the one that you want, and if you're using full area, this is where you can change the AF custom settings for switching sensitivity to determine how sticky you want it to be on the subject that you've started with. But now we have the animal eye and body detection mode. This one is the big update. Our animal eye detection, from a UI perspective, has been brought up to date with, kind of the more commonly used UI. So this will just be a box over the animal's eye. But if the eye is obstructed or can't be seen, it will fall back right to the body detection, which again is already still prioritizing the head wherever possible. So in order to not have a UI that becomes overly complicated, and I know if you're on the human face and eye detection, you may have different opinions about that. In the animal detection, this is set so that body and eye will be independently shown from each other. Because truthfully, if you look out in some of the other designs and the way things have been done, you'll see the box over the animal, then you'll see a box that flashes on and off between the animal's eye, and you don't really know which one it's actually working with, and they're constantly changing. So our engineers, when we worked with, what UI would people prefer, was that, well, if it's detecting the eye, just show me that it's detecting the eye. I don't care that it's, also recognizing the body until I need it to tell me that it's recognizing the body. So that's a big difference here. And a lot of this is down to the new engine that we're using, because this is an upgraded engine, and you can think of this as kind of a derivative of everything that we've learned with the S5 Mark II and the Mark IIX. So lots of horsepower under the hood with this camera, and a lot of advantages that this one now has because of releasing the Mark II and the Mark IIX in the S5 series. Now, probably the coolest focus modes that I think I've enjoyed, or the detection modes that I've enjoyed here, is the car and motorcycle detection. These are simple and straightforward. You've got a car detection, detects motor vehicles. Typically, it's not tuned or trained for, say, commercial vehicles, but sports cars, passenger commercial vehicles. I think if you look at some of the reviews online, they've been able to work with buses and things like that. And then the motorcycle detection. This one, you followed Lumix Live long enough, you know that I love photographing motorcycles, and we're actually going to talk about burst rates in a minute with motorcycles. This one has been super awesome to shoot with, especially with some of the people that I have the opportunity to photograph that are wickedly fast on a motorcycle, and can really benefit from being able to just let the camera pick the point it needs to based on the subject, and all I have to do is work on where I want them framed in my photographs. So really cool setup across the board as far as the new detection modes that are in this camera. And before somebody else asks, is this stuff going to come to the S5 Mark II or the S5 Mark IIX? Honestly, I do not know. I do not have that kind of info. Oh, it would help if I didn't hit the power button. Unfortunately, I do not have that information as to whether or not it is going to come to the S5 Mark II or the S5 Mark IIX. Those are just things that we just don't have the updated information for. So let me get this set back up here. Cool. Actually, before we do that, let's check some questions here. One of the first questions... in AFS, is DFD or PDAF used? AFS, so for single autofocus point, contrast DFD is the primary that's used for single autofocus. And this is actually deliberate because single point autofocus with a contrast in our DFD system is actually much faster than PDAF. PDAF is way more beneficial with movement. So when you're having to constantly track and follow a subject as it's changing phase. For single point focus, where it's just single point activation, we are still faster and we are more accurate. And that's empirically proven. So, yeah. I wish the G9 Mark II had the rear screen from the GH6, but can't wait to upgrade to it. In some cases, so do I. But that also would have meant that the camera would have had to get fairly bigger. It would have had to get fairly thicker to have that screen on it, because the mechanisms that are used to hold that do increase the depth of the camera. And that's, from my understanding, it's fairly common across anyone that's using that kind of screen. Cameras that have it are thicker than those that don't, that either have a tilt or a fully articulating. And the truth is, no matter what screen we put on any camera, it's going to be a 50-50 shot. Either half of you are going to love it or half of you are going to hate it. So it's kind of just how the world is. Let's see here. Does it record in ProRes and ProRes RAW? So currently at this point, the G9 Mark II does not support ProRes RAW or BlackMagic RAW over HDMI. However, it does support ProRes internally up to 1080p, and then you can output 4K or 5.7K ProRes to the SSD that you can attach to it. Ryan, can we expect a firmware update of the GH6 with any of the new G9 Mark II features? Honestly not sure. The G9 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX and the S5 Mark II are using a much more advanced processor than even the GH6 had. The GH6 was a new version processor, but honestly not sure if they're going to come to it. We'll keep an eye on it though. So just spin it like Apple and say we did it to reduce our carbon footprint or something, but it's cool you use the same chassis. Thanks, Sacred. No, this is actually I think a lot of you would be surprised how much research and development goes into this kind of stuff. So Charbex, couldn't the machine learning automatically switch from human to animal to car to motorcycle and just let us choose auto detection mode? Actually, no. This is, I think, one of the biggest misrepresentations that's going on in the photo and video industry right now. No camera, and I repeat this, no camera at all has actual AI in the system. It is machine learning. Machine learning means that there are engineers that have to program what its definitions are. So you're working with data sets of what different subjects look like. If you were to say set up an auto mode where it would auto switch from data sets across the board, you would have to program in and understand that you now are giving up complete control of what the system is actually going to pick for focus. So if you are in an environment where you've got a human, an animal, a car, and a motorcycle for all of our detection modes, all in the same frame, how do you tell it what priority it is? How do you tell it what your intent is for that frame? Because cameras do not have AI built into them, they are AI trained models, you still have to give some sort of input here. So by having these systems where you go in and you say, hey, you know, I want to have the system prioritize efficiency and power and usage on human and eye, that's what it's going to look for. Is it something I think really cool to see in the future? Could be kind of cool, but you're looking at systems at that point that would need to have access to supercomputers to be intelligently, constantly learning and working to try to figure out intent. And that's something that in the photo world, even in the cell phone world, there is no intent that is being derived there in focus mode. So it's an interesting idea, Charbax, but it's, you know, we still have to remember we are still at the point where cameras are still dedicated tools. You still have to have some sort of input over it. If you want a fully automatic system and you want to go that route and you don't want to think about anything in these cameras and you want to let a machine do everything for you, maybe interchangeable lens cameras might not be the product for you at that point. Maybe going into something much more simplified is the aspect that would make the most sense at that point. Sorry, everybody. I'm getting over just a little bit of a cold as well. John Davis, what is the expected ship date? Should be seeing shipping in early November at I think at the latest. Some of this stuff always just kind of changes, you know, depending on worldwide shipment and importing and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's scheduled, I think, right now for early November. Let's see here. Can you integrate same animal eye detection in the S5 Mark II? I covered that a little bit earlier. Small box around the eye for human detection. So this is actually a really good point. Currently, the human and eye detection, as we said, is using the full box with the crosshair. In some cases, this is going to be one of those, I think, just kind of evolution points, right? We've now deployed the new UI for animal eye detection. Could that come to human face and eye detection? Probably. The biggest point right now is just going to be, one, making sure that it stays accurate, and making sure that also there are a very large number of users. And being at the Build Expo last week, I have heard plenty of it. There are many users that still prefer the box with the crosshair over the eyes, because that's what they've used forever. So in some cases, this is really just a, like, all right, let's see how we can maybe slowly integrate that kind of change to it. Now, this is all, there are no guarantees that it's ever going to come to these cameras, but it is something that I recognize from talking to many professionals and many users out there that you would like to see that. The more you want to see of that kind of adjustment being made, or if there was a way to make it an option for you to choose, tell us in the comments after this video. As we've said before, the comments that you leave on this video after it's been posted are what help me get your comments, your opinions over to our teams, so that they can kind of understand, hey, this is what the vast majority of people want. And that information is taken into account as well as what the broader user base wants as well. So remember, you can never just justify the status of something in one small group. If you're on the forums online, that's one opinion. If you're on review sites, that's a different opinion. You're on here on Lumix Live, that's a different opinion. You got to look at all of them completely, because you've got varying different opinions across the board. So let's see here. It's going to be amazing for the next year's Isle of Man TT. When we start looking at some of the photos, because I've been photographing a lot of the motorcycles, I think you're going to really love this thing too. Andy, are some new features coming to the GH6? I feel like G9 kills it even for video. I know the advantage of the GH6, but the main core features and more important ones, the G9 Mark II has them. So here's I think something to remember, right? So the G9 Mark II, as we've said many times, it is designed from a photographer's perspective looking at video. The GH6 is designed from a videographer, a cinematographer's perspective looking at video. What that means is it's kind of like a anomalous kind of thought, if you think about it. Photographers have their needs in the video space, whether they want to admit it or not. There is a need for video in this world. It's why we don't cripple the camera when it comes to video. But design intent is what really comes down to play here. If you need fully unlimited recording, if you need timecode jam sync, if you need tally lamps, if you need that fully articulating and tilting screen, if you need the ability to sync multiple cameras together like that, then a GH or an S1H are going to be the more proper cameras for that style of capture. And while yes, does the GH6 not have PDAF? It's true. That camera is still on our DFD system. That's what happens as technology moves forward. Eventually, you kind of come to a point where things just rapidly move, and you can't always accommodate for timing on every single product out there. Does the G9 Mark II kill the GH6? Hell no. Not in any view, in my opinion. There are still major advantages to the GH6 if you're doing long-form recording, if you're working out in much hotter environments, especially if you're working out in the field and you're wedding and event videographers. As an example, here in Austin, it had been well over 104 degrees Fahrenheit for, probably about a month and a half straight. So that's well over 40 C for our Celsius members here. I can take the GH6 out. I can take an S5 Mark IIX. I can take an S5 Mark II out. Those are actively cooled cameras. Never have to even think about thermals at all. G9 Mark II, if I'm out there, when I'm out on the corner photographing the motorcycles, when they're running through, if I want to jump back and forth between video and stills, I think a little bit harder on this camera. I am primarily using it as a stills camera. If I want to grab a couple runs at like 4K 120 as they're whipping through a corner so I can do some slow speed ramping with it, this is the perfect camera for that. If I know that my primary reason for going up there is video function or video production, that's where I bring my GH6 or I bring the S5 IIX. It's about understanding that tools can be tools designed for different areas, and there is a lot of overlap between what we do and can do with these cameras. All mirrorless cameras have the ability to record video. It's a matter of how much you want to limit them. None of it's going to change cost of a product. So if you think that the G9 Mark II is so video focused and it's raising the cost from a photographer's perspective, it's not. I can just tell you straight up, anyone that tells you that, it's a bold-faced lie. It's not true. These cameras, especially when you start looking at what the general functionality of video is, it's just capturing off live screen on this. It's not increasing the cost at all from a photographer's perspective. GH6, video focused, you get more of the pro side of the video features with that. Yeah. So, have you shot using back button focus with pre-burst enabled? I have. I am not the best person at doing back button focus, just because of the way I had always learned and experienced in photography. But yeah, it works awesome. Pre-burst, as long as you're half pressing and you're letting the focus run to track your subject, our pre-burst functionality is going to be storing those images in, whether you want it in SH20 or SH60. It's going to store that either half second, 1 second, or 1.5 seconds worth of stills until you press that shutter, and then you can continue the buffer on. So yeah, it's great. Automant, will the new PDAF work on the old 12 to 35 and 35 to 100? Of course it will. It's actually a really good segue here, because this autofocus conversation and the pre-burst conversation, as well as the burst, stills burst rate, are something that I think needs to be addressed here, especially for our OM1 fans out there. Sorry, because I still want to be able to actually speak a little bit here. So, in the G9 Mark II, we do not limit any of these functions based on a lens that you use on the camera. You want to use Olympus lenses on this camera? Awesome, cool. Use it. Pre-burst is going to work fine. AFC at 60 frames per second is going to work fine. AFS at 75 frames per second is going to work perfectly fine. It is lens agnostic. Doesn't care what you put on it. As far as taking advantage of PDAF, doesn't matter what lens you throw on this. It's going to use the PDAF system. Where you may see subtle differences are really down to the construction of the lenses that are being used. Much older, I saw a comment on Facebook asking about the old 4/3 lenses. Usually when it comes to age lenses like that, it's really just going to come down to more what motors were used in those lenses, how fast can they move, how accurate can they be. For still shooting, probably going to be okay with them. Video shooting's probably going to be a different story. When it comes to the LUMIX lenses, and this is something I can say unequivocally, we've always designed our lenses, even in the DFD days, to massively outperform what they needed to for the system. At that point, it's a processing, it's how many calculations can you do as far as the DFD contrast system worked. On PDAF for continuous focus is actually easier to do because you're working with more information and you're not having to constantly be moving the lens over and over and over again. It's kind of like why, if you look at it, we've been doing linear focus motors in our lenses for way longer than anyone's really kind of starting to all of a sudden make a deal about it. We've been doing it for seriously long. The original 100 to 400 had linear focus motors in it. So there is nothing to worry about when you want to use fast burst rates or pre-burst functionalities or live view composite or high resolution shot mode. None of our special features lock you into having to have specific lenses that are capable with it. That being said, if we take a look at my G9 Mark II, let's actually talk about those burst modes. So if I come in here and we go into the burst shooting mode, this is where you've got some of those new options. So whether you've got Olympus lenses, you've got LUMIX lenses, this is all identical for you. You're not handicapped in any way here. And I want to stress that again. You are not handicapped here in any way to use these. So you have two separate burst shooting modes. You have burst shot 1 and burst shot 2. These are the two positions on the mode dial. Burst shot 1 is going to be your mechanical burst rates. So high being 10 frames per second, which has an also nice added benefit. Mechanical shutter can use third-party flashes and trigger in burst mode now. I have tested this with my Godox V680 version 2, and it works flawlessly. So burst shot 1 is going to be mechanical burst rates, high, medium, and low. Burst shot 2 is where your electronic fast burst rates are, as well as your additional mechanical ones. So if you know, like, hey, I want to have a high burst rate mechanical and a medium burst rate mechanical, you can do that between 1 and 2. But most of the time, you're probably going to be using this as, I want my fastest burst rate in mechanical and my fastest burst rate for electronic. So fastest burst rate in electronic would be SH75. Now, SH75 is only going to be available in single focus point. So that is, you focus once, lock the point, you can get 75 frames per second. And you're going to get... excuse me. Couldn't get to the mute fast enough. At 75 frames per second, you're going to get around, I think it's 2.8 seconds worth of recording. It's 200 images that you can capture. SH60, you get 3.3 seconds because it's 200 frames per second. And SH20 is going to get you 200 images out of it, so you're going to get closer to about 10 seconds worth of capturing. Now, the pre option, when you see the word pre after it, this is where the pre-burst or the pre-buffer is enabled. So we offer SH60 pre and SH20 pre. For those of you that love to just spray and pray, the 60 frames per second can be really cool, but remember, you're going to get about a 3 to 3.3 second buffer that you have. So it's going to be 200 images regardless. SH20 extends that. You get a little bit longer to record with, but obviously you're at lower frame rate. So this is where your, again, your pre-burst functionality, you select whether or not you want to use it. So if I typically am shooting in 20 frames per second for pre-burst because 60 is cool. 60 is a really cool spec to see there. And it's 60 no matter what lens you're using on this. Again, you're not hamstrung. You're not locked in to have to use specific lenses for this. It uses it on any of them. So if we're using this and we've got it SH60 pre, once you select the mode that you want to work with, this is where you can change the duration. So do I want 30 frames being stored in buffer when I half press the shutter? Do I want 60 or do I want 90? And if you're in 20, it's 10, 20, and 30. So for here, think of this as a good way to, kind of compensate maybe for your reaction time. If you've got great reaction time, cool. Maybe you only need, up to 30 frames in that buffer, just because it's nice to have a little bit of a, kind of buffer, no pun intended, to make sure you get that shot. But if you've never photographed, say, birds in flight, or you've never photographed birds that are taking off, or motorcycles, or cars, or any of this stuff, if you've never photographed anything like that, you've got the ability to give yourself that little bit of extra space, little bit more room, so that you're just focusing on composition, getting yourself that shot, and then click the shutter, and you've got those images there, because it's going to store it as however many images you want. So you can select through this, pick which ones you want. So that's the burst shooting mode. You also have, this is kind of the other, we updated this years ago, but you also have this ability. In standard shooting, you've got mechanical, electronic first curtain, fully electronic, or electronic plus noise reduction. Electronic plus noise reduction is the new one. This is what allows you to really press having long exposure, but you want to have electronic shutter with it so that you can still run your noise reduction. By default, the camera's going to ship with this as mechanical. I typically go in and change it to auto so that I have it there ready to go. Let's see some of the other questions that came through. Is Synchro Scan tool present in the G9 Mark II? Yes, I believe it is. I'm like 99% sure Synchro Scan is in this camera as well. Has the focus bracketing been changed or updated from the G9? Does it work with flash and pause to allow recharging like the Olympus does? I have to double check. I don't do enough with focus bracketing, so I'll have to double check and see about the flash and if it works well there. Let's see here. Where did we go? Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, YouTube. Jumping comments. Gonna be amazing. You'd love to see some of this stuff come to the GH6. Pause. Okay, there we go. I would like an option to choose box plus crosshair or box on eye. Thank you, Charbax. Can you give us a link to the upgraded LUMIX lenses that were featured working with the G9 Mark II, please? Yeah, if you just go to if you're in the US, you can do the shop.panasonic.com. It's a brand new website. You can take a look at the Micro Four Thirds stuff, and all the related products are linked there. Where did we go here? Yeah, I know what you mean about the difference between G9 and G6. My GH6, it's a workhorse. What is happening with my internet today? I'm going to have a conversation. If the stream keeps getting dodgy, please just bear with me. I did just upgrade my Google Fiber here, and for some reason, it's been solid all day. Now it just keeps dumping up and down. I would love real-time LUT feature on the GH6. I know what you probably say, but I feel it's possible. We already can upload monitor LUTs. Yeah, real-time LUT, I'm not sure if it's going to come to there, but we can ask. How's the IBIS performance different with the G9 Mark II on dual IS2 lenses like the 12-60 or 12-35 Leica versus non-dual IS2 lenses like the 10-25 or the Olympus 12-40? Well, dual IS2 is really designed to give you that like ultra strong steady stabilization out in the ultra telephoto range. On the G9 Mark II, the in-body stabilization is rated up to 8 stops at an effective 120 millimeter field of view. So that is like the strongest that you can get is 8 stops out to 120 millimeter field of view. Longer telephoto for dual IS2, when you're looking at out to say 280 millimeter, that's where it's rated at 7.5 stops, and that's more down to the fact that optic stabilization is not really as strong as in body. Let's see here. G9 Mark II max dynamic range in photo is ISO 200 base ISO, but GH6 best dynamic range is no, Cliff. So that's more information that's just inaccurate. The G9 Mark II's base ISO is 100. That is where dynamic range boost is working. You have full functionality there. The GH6, the DR boost in photography was a bit higher. So some differences there. Let's hear. I just want to make that one clear because there's a lot of people that are spreading misinformation on the sensor in this camera, and I'm going to do my damnedest to just put my foot down and stop any of that information from getting spread, or try to. Oh, man. Let's see here. Can I have, now it says, can I have videos and photos saved to different SD cards? Yes, you can, 100%. You just change what the card allocation is on this camera, and you'll see it can go out there. So, actually, to look at that, let's go back into the photo mode here. So for this, you go into your settings option here, and then under the card setup, this is where you do double card slot function, recording method, and you'll have backup recording, which will duplicate backup both of the cards, or you can do allocation. When you set allocation, this is where I can have JPEGs go to a separate card, RAW to another, and then video set to a different card. So it gives you full flexibility to change all this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, you have that. Some of the other kind of cool things here with this camera. We've talked about the real-time LUT functionality in this camera, and if you want to actually be able to work with real-time LUT, there's a couple things that you want to actually do first with this. So real-time LUT on the newer cameras, S5 Mark II, S5 Mark IIX, and the G9 Mark II, are done by using the LUT Library. So with LUT Library, this is where you actually load your LUTs into this. You can load up to 10 at a time, so you can have 10 on the card, and the camera will recognize all 10, and you can load them in. These can be .cube files, they can be .vlt files, whichever one you're comfortable working with. If you want to use .cube files, make sure you are using an SDXC memory card. SDXC memory cards let you write a longer file name. You're not limited to the 8 characters, which on SDHC cards it's 8 characters including the extension. So this lets you have a lot more flexibility. Once you load them into your LUT library, so this would literally be coming in here, clicking on set 9, and if I had LUTs loaded on the card, it would let me load them in. This is where you then program them in, they're stored and ready to go. But you also have, if you go up into photo style settings, you can show and hide additional photo styles. This is where, as you go through here, by default, all the normal color profiles are shown, but I can also come in here and I can show all 10 of my possible My Photo Style options. Now, your My Photo Style options are where you can come in here and you can program in various different color profiles based on those LUTs. And you also have the true real-time LUT named color profile. Now, just so you're aware, if you're using this camera from a photographic perspective, I do not recommend using real-time LUT as the photographic base for using LUTs on this camera. The reason being is, in photographic terms, Vlog and vGamut with a raw still image is not a great tool. You would really want to use the My Photo Style and then pick whatever base you like to work with. In my case, I have them varied between different color profiles that I've got selected here. And with this, I have this set on standard. You can do a couple different tweaks to the style that you want on here. You can change what ISO values you want that My Photo Style to work with, what white balance you want it to work with, and then what LUT you want to have it applied to. I have an entire walkthrough on the LUTs that I will post up after this video goes live. We'll put a card up right here so that you can actually go through and see, okay, what I'm talking about with real-time LUT, how to load them. Because you can also create your own and load them in from Photoshop. So the real-time LUT function is a really fun thing to have brought down onto the G9 Mark II, and it really just becomes an awesome tool if you're someone who likes to be able to shoot RAW plus JPEG, and if the JPEGs are the way you want them, cool, there you go, your JPEG's good. If you're someone who likes to still be able to edit the RAW files, now your RAW file's not hurt by being changed into Vlog vGamut, and you can edit that file like normal. So lots of cool flexibility there. Where do we go here? How does the AF work with speed boosters and adapted lenses? Previously, it was pretty bad. Hopefully, like the S5 Mark II, which is almost perfect with EF lenses on the MC21. This one is, honestly, I don't have any information about it. I have not been able to test any of it. Something to remember is that on the L-Mount, in the L-Mount Alliance, the MC21 is a first-party adapter. This is not a third-party. This is not guessing at, reverse engineering how the systems work. Micro Four Thirds with those adapters from like Metabones or Viltrox or any of them, they're reverse engineering how the system works. So you're, as I think Hugh Brownstone says, your mileage may vary depending on those adapters that you use. We're not making any statement on how AF performance is going to be with those. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind, Animal. When you're looking at it. Is there a trade-in program? There may be at your dealer of choice. We don't typically do any of that stuff directly, so. Let's see here. I was only asking... Okay, gotcha. How does the AF performance with adapter... Okay, yep, just that one. Did this just duplicate all of the questions? Okay, so. All right. So, if I want to take a look at actually some of the images here that I've done with the G9 Mark II, and specifically because we talked about motorcycles, looking at long focal lengths, fast frame rates, and how the tracking performance is with this. So, these images are shot with the G9 Mark II. These are with the new 100 to 400, and in most cases, these are anywhere between 100. This grouping is at about 117 millimeters, so not all the way out at 400, but for where I wanted to frame for this corner. And this rider was running through this corner very fast. We're talking probably 50 to 60 miles an hour. I do not condone, LUMIX does not condone this. This person happened to come out and run really fast on this corner. But this is with the subject detection when you're using motorcycle detection. So this is the 10 frames per second burst, because I was doing mechanical testing at this point, at 1600th of a second, f7.1, and 1000 ISO. So this is at 1000 ISO. And as we run through this, you'll see that it's just right here. And it's following right on the subject here. So again, motorcycle detection right from this camera, following straight through this entire burst at 10 frames per second. And it's deadlocked on this rider all the way through. Even when the rider starts to get to the point where it's not actually fully in the frame, we're still deadlocked right on the bike. To the point where when you start to get to where my panning is not good anymore, that's where we lose it, because now you've got motion blur, not focus blur. Different setup here. Another rider coming more directly towards me. This one's out at 210 millimeter using the new lens. Same thing, f7.1. This is ISO 640 since he's coming in towards the sun. And again, as we're just going through here, we are locked on this rider. And this is with, as I said, the motorcycle detection and using the continuous autofocus on the G9 Mark II. Just constantly deadlocked on this subject all the way through. Even again to the point where he starts to get so close that my framing at 210 millimeter now starts to get a little tough as they start to get close, because now you're really trying to be able to make sure that you're framed up properly. So as we keep going, looking at more, that one, we're right into the arms here. And again, that's where the rider starts to go off the frame, and we're still focused right on the motorcycle. So tracking on this camera is insane. Using detection modes, it's crazy how sharp and how fast this one can go. Again, another one, 124 millimeter, 1600th of a second again. And this is where I shoot in aperture priority with the G9 Mark II, and I set minimum shutter speed depending on the type of shooting that I'm doing. So I'm able to get this thing to follow seriously close with these riders and keeping everything tack sharp right in frame, not worrying about any of the issues for how this thing's going to work, as far as just keeping right on what I want. So when I'm working with fast-paced motion on this camera, this is something to be very aware of with how the system works. In our camera, you have various different AF custom settings in this. By default, your camera is going to come as set 1. Set 1 is AF sensitivity 0, auto switching sensitivity 0, and motion subject prediction +1. This is designed to be, you know, kind of general use, just comfortable to work with across the board. But if you're going to be doing ultra fast tracking motion, if you're going to be doing bird in flight, if you're going to be doing like the motorcycles like I was showing, if you're photographing sports, kids that run around a lot, this is where you want to come in and use a lot of these different AF settings here. Set 1, as I said, versatile, basic. Set 2, designed for fast-moving objects that move in a singular direction, so trains, airplanes, drag strips, things like that for cars. Things where you know the predictable direction that subject's going to be moving on. Set 3, more sports. This is where you're going to be like football, basketball, things like that. This is where your AF sensitivity, you want it to stay more locked on if you're using full area, so you want it to stay on your subject. The switching sensitivity is going to be a little more responsive. Subject prediction, because they're very variable, they move around a lot. That's what your set 3 is. All the motorcycle shots that I've been doing were done with set 4. Set 4 is where, again, this is designed for things that are changing speed and direction pretty significantly. So you're able to utilize each of these various different modes, and no matter what you're going to be doing, whether you're going to be in faster sports options here, whether you're going to be photographing more kind of casually, remember that you have these things set here. And the vast majority of times you're going to be able to see that because each of these can be customized, you can tune it for your style of shooting. And you may only have to do this once, and it's just, it makes the system that much more responsive depending on the type of situation you're going to be photographing in. So be sure to remember to use those with the G9 Mark II when you get it in your hands. Let's see here. As a GH6 owner shooting video at ISO 2000, does the G9 Mark II match the GH6 at 2000 ISO or pass it? It's going to be fairly similar, maybe a little bit better than the GH6 at 2000 ISO. The big difference is that the dynamic range boost function, it's an automatic system across the board now. So in Vlog, you don't have to go to 2000 ISO on the G9 Mark II. You can go down to ISO 500. That's the new base ISO for DR boost in Vlog. In standard profiles like 709, it's down to 100, I believe. So, are there any difference in video codecs and external SSD capabilities between the G9 Mark II and the S5iix? Is the image processor the same? Same overall capabilities as far as video codecs for external SSD versus internal SD cards. So if you've got an S5 Mark II-X and you want to pick up a G9 Mark II, it's going to be about the same experience as far as what video codecs. The big difference is, as we've said before, it's down to the fact that we have to remember the G9 Mark II is designed with video in mind from a photographer's perspective. You don't need unlimited recording, if you don't need ultra high temperature operating long form recording, G9 Mark II is going to be perfect. If you're in where I would say like 30% or more of your production is 100% for video production, GH6 or S5 Mark II or Mark II-X is probably going to be the better tool because they're actively cooled. Let's see here. G9 Mark II has live composite too, just the camera I wanted. Yes, G9 Mark II does also have live view composite. So for those as a refresher, live view composite is accessed through the manual exposure mode in photo. And manual photo, when you have the camera set up, you can program one of your custom function buttons to drop right into the live view composite menu. Turn that mode on, and then you're good to go. You can do a 1/1.6 of a second is the fastest shutter, and all the way down to 60 seconds as your longest. and then pick your aperture, your ISO values, whatever you want there, and then you'll be good to go. Super straightforward, awesome, fun feature to work with. And we'll be talking more about Live View Composite in the next kind of setups. Windsor says, do you have a chance to talk about intervalometer? I was actually just getting to that. Intervalometer on the G9 Mark II is also upgraded from what we've done as far as intervalometers on the previous cameras, so the original G9. When you change the top dial to the intervalometer or the high resolution shot mode, this is where it will actually go right into the menu option to change settings. So our time-lapse system here has actually got two options. You have time-lapse or you have stop motion. So for time-lapse, you now have a pretty cool ability here to go in for image count, press the display button, and then tell the system what it is that you're going to be doing. How long of a video do you want to create? How long of a time do you want to have the camera be recording for? And what frames per second is your output going to be? So if I change this to, say, 24 frames per second, I want the video length to be, let's say I want to do a 5-minute time lapse. And then the shooting duration, say I want this to be done for 48 hours, is how long of a time lapse I want. The camera will go in there, program, and say, okay, image count should be 7,200 images, shooting interval should be 24 seconds, push the display button, and then this can program it right into the system here. So this is a very straightforward. You're going to be 7,200 images, 24 seconds between each image. When I press the set button, it's now programmed into there. If you're shooting an aperture priority, this is where you can turn exposure leveling on with this as well. Or when you go down a little further, you can do create a new folder at the start of the time-lapse recording. So this is actually kind of important for anyone that's doing longer time-lapse recording, but you may also have some standard regular stills on the card. You want to make sure that the file number reset is turned on, so this way they'll start at a sequential 0001. And then create new folder means that if you're already within a folder, you will be able to click, when you start the time-lapse, it'll start a new folder for the capture. So you don't have to go into a folder that's already partially filled. This starts everything fresh. Once you've got that set up, you also have the option here to do shooting interval settings. If you leave this on, it will only run the system once. If you do off, this will actually start another set immediately after the first set has been completed. Start time, you can program after 2 seconds. So you press the shutter, waits 2 seconds, and then starts. Or you can actually set a time that you want it to start. This is good for if you have the camera hooked up to external power and you've got it in a remote location where maybe you don't have the ability to kind of like be right on top of it. The most important thing with this, make sure your camera time is set accurately. There's been a number of times where like I have forgotten that I've changed time zones and I wanted to start the time lapse at say 4 o'clock in the morning to catch a sunrise, but didn't realize it. And when I was in Japan with that trip, it was just completely wrong and I missed it. So make sure your time is set properly in the camera, and make sure that you've, if you're changing time zones, make sure you go into the settings and change the time zone that your camera is set up to. This way you'll know that, okay, the time-lapse function is going to work the way it's supposed to. So, Windsor 7, where can I get this for the S5 Mark II? The S5 Mark II has all of this function as well. It's the same overall systems that you'll have in time-lapse in that camera as well. Sorry if this has been spammed and answered already. But I'm late to the stream. Improved autofocus algorithms and firmware update for S5 Mark II and Mark IIX. I did say this before. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can say about whether or not these upgrades for the AF system are going to come to an S5 Mark II or Mark IIX. What I would recommend is bear with us. Make sure you're following us on all the various social platforms. Leave us comments in the description and the after this video is posted that you want to see things like that or like the AF UI change, because all of that helps us get that over to the engineers so that they can kind of understand what it is that y'all want. Tommy M says, great job, development team. I'm thrilled that Micro Four Thirds is far from dead. Jumped in the system a couple years ago to G95, added GH6, G9, GX9, and 4 other MFT bodies. Well, it looks like maybe, Tommy, you're going to have to add another body to that kit. G9 Mark II, it's the perfect camera for you. Robert says, does recording to the SSD extend the time before overheating? I will use this as a BTS camera for stills and B-cam for video. In Southern California, LA, high desert, with my A-cam being a GH6. So, Robert, it actually, external storage of the media doesn't actually really change anything thermal-wise. This camera uses dual SD cards. It's not using CF Express cards. CF Express cards are the ones that can really throw a lot more heat into the camera. So, as far as extending recording times, no. You're not really going to see an extending time there. If anything, using an external SSD can actually pull maybe a little bit less battery life from the camera, because now you have to power an SSD as well. That's why we are very specific on the drives that we validate for use over SSD. They are properly balanced for power consumption versus storage capacity. So kind of keep that in mind. This as a B-cam in video, think of the G9 Mark II as your pickup camera. So you want to be able to do a couple of quick shots, throw them in there. If you're doing long-term recording where you just click start recording and let it run, GH6, S5 Mark II, S5 Mark IIX, those are the cameras to go for. If you're handheld, run and gun, and you need a couple quick clips, you're maybe not working in really hot environments, this camera is going to be perfectly fine for you. My studio camera, I still have an S5 Mark II up there. I'll probably switch it to the G9 Mark II for a little while, just so that we can show that it works perfectly fine there. But yeah, that's what you've got as far as the whole setup there. What is the happy medium when looking for longer recording times but also faster sensor readout for reduced jello in fast action sports? At this point right now, if you want the longer recording times and the faster readout speed sensor, it is going to be in the Micro Four Thirds world. That is going to be either a GH6 or a G9 Mark II. Micro Four Thirds sensors, and remember, this sensor is able to do nearly the same readout speed as stacked sensors, without having to have the negative dynamic range benefits of a stacked sensor. Stacked sensors, while they're cool, you lose dynamic range with them. There's always a trade-off in what you're looking at as far as technologies. I know everyone wants a stacked sensor, but we are within what I would consider margin of error for speed of readout on this. Plus, we actually offer 4K 120 in a Micro Four Thirds camera with higher resolution. So, that being said, you want to do long-term recording. If you are in relatively controlled environments, G9 Mark II can do that job just fine for you, and it's going to be a spectacular stills camera. If you're in really hot environments, outdoors, that's where the GH6 is going to be a better choice, or an S5 Mark IIX will be a little bit better choice for you. So, yeah. Is it possible to speed up the buffer by clearing by writing to an SSD, as this doesn't have the CF Express card slot? Buffer clearing is going to be a little bit of a factor of the media source that you're using and the bus speed from the internal memory to that external, or to the storage device. I think Richard Wong actually did a pretty good explanation of it, showing that if you use a V30 card, and this is one of the biggest points I want to make for a lot of people, if you think using a V30 card is perfectly fine in a camera because you're never going to really need to worry about the write speeds, think again. V30 cards, even though they're cheap, relatively inexpensive, they will impact things like buffer clearing. I believe his buffer clearing on a V30 card was like 7 minutes. V90, V60 cards, you're going to be around a minute, and that's if you bash the buffer completely full. It's one of the reasons why I typically will shoot 20 frames per second for the vast majority of things, or I will shoot mechanical. and then just let it go. I'm usually never having to run into a situation where I need to just hammer on a shutter. That spray and pray kind of works really... It can be okay, but definitely make sure you're using faster media. SSDs have a much faster transfer rate. At that point, I've never actually tested it with the SSD, but I can do a little bit of a test with it as far as how it clears, and then we can get back to you on a future stream. Can USB-C power the camera from 9-volt 3-amp and store external SSD at the same time from the same couple using a hub to hot swap power? No. Interchangeable lens cameras do not have the same hardware that desktop computers or Mac computers have, or laptops. Those USB protocols have a lot more control. The processors are very different than what you're running in cameras. So at the current point, if you want to use SSD external recording, you would need to, and you want to run power for long periods of time, you would need to use something like this, an external battery delete that could run into an external storage or an external power supply. That's how you'd get the ability to do longer term recording with it. So yeah. Did you get more information regarding GH6 and timecode? Can I read it continuously from generator, or does it only jam once you plug in? Tellings. I had this conversation with Matt, but I honestly can't remember what he told me, so I will have to email him to remind me what he told me. That's completely my fault. I am so sorry that I have not been able to get back to you on that yet. Sorry if this has been asked for, but only just joined stream. What's the maximum video resolution output via HDMI? Can you output 5.7K open gate? Highest resolution output over HDMI is going to be 4K 60. I have to double check. I'm not sure if you can do 4K 120 because I don't think there are any devices that support 4K 120 for recording. 5.8K open gate is not possible to do over HDMI as a video signal because it is not part of the HDMI standard or specification. There's nothing for 4x3 for that. So, hey, there's Matt. Timecode can read from the generator. There you go. Thank you, Matt, for jumping on there. Super Zero. The original G9 compared well to the EM1 Mark II for dynamic range according to photons to photos. DxO Mark. Does the G9 Mark II finally top them all? I believe it does. I personally find some issue with the way the cameras get validated or run through those independent tests for dynamic range. This is a totally different system, the way this works, and I don't think there are any other comparative cameras being tested on his website with how this works. So 100% in my shooting with this camera, comparing to my G9, I am getting better dynamic range. Even if you look at things like what Richard Wong has tested, even though that's not really probably the best way to test it because he's altering EXIF data so that a general RAW editor can open it, he has shown that there's more dynamic range than the OM1, than the 20 megapixel sensor. This sensor, there's more shadow range that you can pull. They're a little bit cleaner. In general, that's the same experience that I've had with this camera. And yeah, I just encourage everybody to, as soon as we actually get a little bit closer to when RAW files can be edited, we will be doing more testing like that. But from my perspective, and y'all know, I try to be as straightforward as you can, but I do have inherent bias. This camera has been just super sweet as far as the stills camera goes. G9 has both PDAF and CDAF. When are each used? They're all used in tandem. It's another point in the industry that I think other companies have gone to great lengths to hide. Modern PDAF systems or on-sensor PDAF systems are always using contrast as well. Contrast is typically done in the last part of the image. So PDAF gets you to the point really fast. Contrast is what refines it for that little final step. So yeah, it uses both all the time. If you are in single point AF, it's using the DFD system because single point autofocus confirmation and acquisition is faster than using PDAF for it. Let's see here. Battery wise, okay, yeah, laughing about from the launch there. But yes, just to clarify, the camera does use BLK22 batteries. If you have the original G9, you can also use the BLK22 batteries in that camera. So, yeah. Let's see. Any other questions here? I am actually going to have to wrap the stream up in a few more minutes, but where else? Yeah, last thing I really wanted to, let's see here. Will 4K 60 record forever to dual SD cards without overheating at normal temperature environments like below 25°C or room temperature? Charback, so we do not have a hard limitation put on this camera. I know that that's something you'll be very happy about. It is going to be more dependent on the thermal environment that you use this camera in. I encourage you to go take a look at Micro Four Nerds review of the camera, at some of the others that like Jordan over at Petapixel. I completely encourage you to go take a look at their reviews for their real world testing. My experience, camera's been fine, 4K 60, but remember, it is going to be a little bit more challenging based on the environments that you're filming in and how hot or cool the environment is. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. Last thing I wanted to actually show everybody is that's the wrong screen. This one is the new color profile that we have built into this camera. The G9 Mark II deploys the new Leica Monochrome color profile. These are JPEGs taken from the G9 Mark II with the 42.5 Nocticron. And this profile is different than our L Monochrome profiles that we've had in the camera for years. L Monochrome has been a solid kind of design to emulate popular black and white profiles. This new profile is actually Leica's monochrome design. Their information has what's really kind of designed, informed how it should look, what the tonality should be, and what its contrast level should be. So we are super excited about having this profile in here because you get a very, very specific looking black and white. If you love shooting black and white, if you like shooting in JPEG, for the time being, this profile is included. It gives you an awesome tonal range in the images, and honestly, it has been one of the more fun color profiles to shoot with. You get just that rich black and white color out of this camera. And then on top of it, like we said, you also get the ability to use things like real-time LUT to go in there and program in your own kind of looks that you want on top of these. So like I've done here, I've applied, excuse me, my voice is very quickly starting to go, so I do have to end this in a minute. I've applied the looks from Ted Forbes into some of these files with handheld high-resolution shot. So this is a handheld high-resolution shot. Actually, where is that one? Here it is. This is a 100 megapixel handheld image from the G9 Mark II with an applied LUT on top of it, and just seeing how ridiculously detailed this image can be using the new setup. And this is with the Nocticron as well. So with that, everybody, my voice is very quickly fading right now. I am so sorry. But we will have to wrap it for today. We will be back again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will be continuing the conversation about the G9 Mark II. If you have questions and I wasn't able to get to them today, I apologize. Leave those questions as a comment in the video after it's posted. That will help me actually kind of write out and make sure that I get covering them next Thursday at 2 p.m. Outside of that, everybody, again, thank you all so much. I encourage you to go take a look at the G9 Mark II. I will be making sure to get the timestamps set on this video so you can go back to some of the conversations we had later. Other than that, I hope you all have an awesome rest of your weekend. I know I am going to be taking a little bit of time off to recover my voice, relax a little bit. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being awesome participants in these live streams. If you like the video, hit like. If you think we deserved a subscribe from you, subscribe. It's awesome. It helps us grow these more. And I really hope to see many more of you again next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, here on LUMIX Live. Later.